بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah, as of yesterday, we did some nasab, introduction to the nasab of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and to the entire shajara. We went into details of it. Up till Hazrat Abdul Muttalib. Today, inshallah, we'll move on from this and we'll discuss Abdul Muttalib's dream and a little bit about him in much more detail in terms of the family and everything, and how many sons he had. And also we'll discuss the nazar of Hazrat Abdul Muttalib as well. So, when Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, how did it come about to him, this whole dream? There's a background story that needs to be understood before we move on to the dream of Abdul Muttalib. There was a Qabila called Jurham. They were actually the inhabitants of Yemen, and they used to live there. But because there was a famine that happened over there, so they moved from that place, and they came closer and closer to the present Saudi Arabia or present Mecca. They came very close to that. So they met Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam and the mother Hajar, very close to the Mai Zamzam, to the well of Zamzam. Banu Jurham really liked that place, and they basically decided they want to settle here. And when they settled here, they obviously also, because they started settling here, then it was inevitable that one of them got married. One of the daughters got married to Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam. So therefore, Banu Jurham and Ismail alayhi salam's family became as one, and because of the marriage bond. And Banu Jurham started settling, and they lived there for 103 years almost. And obviously, after the passing away of Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, he basically made his son Qaidar the mutawalli of Khana Kaaba, or Masjid al-Haram. And therefore, hence this was transitioned and given one generation after another. Everybody was given the mutawalli, and they were coming from Banu Ismail. Because once again, it was the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that from the family of Banu Ismail, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was to come. So obviously, this was happening accordingly, systematically from the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the time passed, unfortunately, there was a fallout between Banu Jurham and Banu Ismail, and they basically took over by force from Banu Ismail, and they started ruling the areas of the Mecca and the Haram and whatever, the Arabian Peninsula sort of. And they were very, very tyrant in that sense. So they started doing a lot of tyranny, and they started oppressing people. So people got fed up of them, and they decided to revolt against them. Resulted that they basically couldn't, because all the tribes came together and they revolted against Banu Jurham. Banu Jurham didn't have a choice, but they had to flee. But before they fled, what they did was they had all the treasures of Masjid al-Haram, and they have everything that they knew about, the secrets of Masjid Baytullah, Kaabatullah and all that they were interested, because they took it away from Banu Ismail, and they knew everything, so they basically took it away from them. So they took all those treasures and they buried it in the well of Zamzam. And what they did with well of Zamzam was they leveled it to the ground, exactly to the ground, so nobody could ever see that there is actually a well there. And they buried it, and it remained this way up till the time of Banu Hashim, and up till the time when Abdul Muttalib became the leader of the clan, of the tribe, and he became the Sardar of the Arabian Peninsula. He used to sleep close to the Hatim area, and in that, when he was sleeping one day, he saw a dream that a man is telling him, "Ihfir barra," meaning that dig barra. So he asked, Mama barra. He said, what is barra? The person left. The next day, he sees the same dream. He was sleeping in the same spot. And now this man is saying, Ihfar maznuna. Go dig maznuna. He said, Wamal maznuna. What is maznuna? And the person left again. The third day, same dream. And this time the person says, Ihfar tayyiba. And he says the same question, Wamal tayyiba. The person leaves again. Fourth time, when he says to him, Ihfar zamzam. So Abdul Muttalib asked him, Wamal zamzam. And in the reply, this time the person says, La tanzifu abadan wa la tuzam tasqal hajij al-azam. Tasqal hajij al-azam. Sorry. He basically said to him that this is a well of some that has quenched the thirst of great number of Hujjaj, people who come for pilgrimage. Abdul Muttalib knew that this dream has some sort of truth and reality behind. So he counseled with everyone in the Arabian Peninsula and the other tribe members and everyone. They all denied it. They said, no, don't dig up, do not look it up, don't do anything about it. But he denied everyone, and he said, no, I'm going to do it. And along with his son Harith, who helped him out. So he would basically dig, and Harith will remove the mud from his father. So he was basically helping his father. And when he kept on doing it and doing it, and finally, at last, he saw this well, and he realized what it was. So he says, Hazrat wa Ismail, that this is the well of Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam. And he realized it. So what he did was that this is a well, and so he basically restructured the well again, and he developed hoses so that people could take benefit from its water. And people started taking benefit, obviously, but one needs to understand that there are always those who are not your well-wishers. So they try to do what good you've done. So the people would come in, so some individuals who are not the well-wishers of Abdul Muttalib, they would come in and they would basically manipulate or maneuver with the hoses that he has developed. So one day when he would see this, every day he would correct it in the morning, and at night time somebody would come and do the same thing. So he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, whomsoever is doing this, Allah inflict them with some sort of disease and sickness as they are interfering in your business and the business of Hujjaj Karam and this great khidmat of quenching the thirst of the Hujjaj with Zamzam water. And he made Elan the next day as well, that look, whomsoever is doing this, realize that if you do it again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inflict you with such disease that you will not be cured of. Immediately those people realized, look, if we were to do it again, there's a chance we will get sick, and everybody would find out, so they stopped doing anything with it. And hence, this subheading of the dream of Abdul Muttalib comes to an end, and Muslim rahmatullah alayh jumps into the nazar of Abdul Muttalib. Because when he was digging, obviously he only had one son, Harith, Abdul Muttalib. So he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's a lot of work. So obviously, sons are a means of a shoulder for the father. They become a means of a shoulder for a father. They support the father, and father feels stronger. Even though he may be older, but if he has many sons, and they are very, very, obedient to him, and they are supportive of him, definitely father's strength becomes even much more higher, even though he may be older in age. So he made the dua, he made the nazar, that, oh Allah, if I was to get 10 sons, I will sacrifice one in your path. And the sacrifice was literally the meaning of actual sacrifice. So he made that dua, and obviously he was given a son with the name of Abdullah as well, who was his favorite son, who was very, very dear to him. One day in his dream, he sees that there's a man saying to him, Ya Abdul Muttalib, awfu bi nazrika li rabbi hazal bayt. That, O Abdul Muttalib, fulfill your nazar for the sake of the Lord of this house, meaning the Kaabatullah, the Lord of Kaabatullah. Abdul Muttalib woke up from his dream and shared it with his sons, all 10 of them, and told them. So they all said, Awfu bi nazrika waf'al ma shi'ta. That fulfill your nazar and do as you're told to do. Abdul Muttalib, what he did was, he put the names of all his 10 sons in a in a bag or on whatever to do a, what we call it nowadays, lucky draw, basically. And that's what we will translate to qur'a, meaning lucky draw, sort of that sense. He did that, and the name of Abdullah came. Obviously, he was dear to him, but he did not hesitate because he made that nazar. So immediately he had a knife in his hand, and he was taking him to the same spot where Ibrahim took his son to, for a sacrifice. But because he was a dear son, and obviously the sisters also loved him dearly, they came running to Abdul Muttalib and they said, do not slaughter our brother. Instead, why don't you do this? Take the name of Abdullah and take 10 camels and put them in the same bag and see, maybe the name of the 10 camels would come and you sacrifice the 10 camels instead of Abdullah. So he did that, and Allah's qudrat was that his name came up again. Abdullah's name came up again. He did the same thing again. This time he increased the camels, and he kept on doing it until he reached to the number of 100. 100 camels and the name of Abdullah, and finally the camels qurra came out, or the lucky draw came out. So he slaughtered 100 camels instead of Abdullah for that nazar. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, this is again a masala, it has something to do with fiqh, but again, because the Musannif has mentioned it and it's a great point, we need to take benefit of it as well. That Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this was the sunnah that began with Abdul Muttalib. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept it the same way, that anybody who would be, who has to give diyah, it is going to be 100 camels. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept it the same way. And also, Prophet ﷺ was given the title of Ibn Zabihain, the son of two great, sacrifices. So Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anh was in the company of Prophet ﷺ, took this narration. So people asked him, who is Ibn Zabihain? What is he talking about, Ibn Zabihain? Who does it refer to? So Muawiyah radiallahu anh mentioned that it refers to Abdullah and Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam, because both were, meant for sacrifice, and, both were averted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the decree. And then Abdul Muttalib would feed the Quraysh, would help the Quraysh for a long time. And because Abdul Muttalib was from the manhaj of the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam, so he followed the upright deen. He followed the deen of Tawheed of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. So he would tell his sons not to do zulm, not to oppress people, not to create corruption in the land. Abdul Muttalib would, preach them about not to marry your own maharim. Because one needs to understand, Abdul Muttalib was always at the upright religion, and the other Arab pagans and other Arab tribes were involved into different things, which included into idol worshipping and rusumat that were completely prohibited in the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So he would tell them not to marry the maharimat, which is the daughters, the sisters, the aunts, both from maternal and paternal side, and not to do zina with girls, and not to do alcohol, and not to consume alcohol, and not to bury your daughters alive, how Arabs used to do, because when they would have daughters in their hand. And he would also cut the hands of the thieves if they were to do that. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept the same way the Shariat when prophethood was bestowed upon Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he also made a condition, because Arabs were involved into the pilgrimage as well. So they would do pilgrimage being fully naked, completely naked, without any clothes, because their concept was that we do so and so action, we take benefit of our wives, therefore we cannot do tawaf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we have to be fully naked. But Abdul Muttalib would preach to his sons, do not do fully naked, rather have clothes on and cover your satar. That was the deen of Abdul Muttalib, and he used to follow that. In the riwayat of Sahih al-Muslim, it is mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that from the family of Ismail alayhi salam, Bani Kanana was the chosen one, and from Bani Kanana, Quraysh was the chosen one, and from the Quraysh, Banu Hashim was the chosen one, and I was chosen from Banu Hashim for the work of prophethood. Over here, Musanni Rahmatullahi brings a point as well, which is of a great benefit. That this did not mean that Prophet ﷺ was doing tafakhur, that he was boasting about himself, he was showing that, look at me, I'm so special and all that. One needs to understand the difference between us or awliya and anbiya. Prophet ﷺ is merely mentioning the fact that this is just the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah chose so and so people, and out of them I came out. And the difference between tafakhur and mentioning a fact is, in tafakhur, you basically mean to lower the other person, and you want to boast yourself, and you want to bring yourself on top of everyone. This is the reason why our awliya and mashayikh are very, very considerate when it comes to, any virtues if they have. They are usually humble, they usually do tawazu, and they lower themselves, they humble themselves completely, and they say, usually, they don't even tell them that I have so and so, thing. Like if I am a murid of a so and so sheikh, they won't even mention that to anybody, because they feel hiding it is more better and it's important than actually showing it to other people, right? And prophethood, it is wajib and faraz upon them to make i'lan of prophethood, because prophethood has to be followed. Prophet, without any i'lan, without knowing there's a prophet, so how is somebody's going to follow you, right? So it is of utmost importance that we understand this difference, especially today's day and age. Unfortunately, we live in the world where we may have very little accomplishments, or maybe close to zero accomplishment, but we may think that we are the best in the world and there's nobody else better than us. This is called real tafakhur, and we should abstain from it. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you and bestowed upon you anything, any blessing of His, from the perspective of deen especially, and you may be, you may be a graduate of a very glorious and a luminary idara or institute, don't boast about it. Be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try hiding your qualities. If Allah ta'ala has bestowed upon you any quality, if you are into tasawwuf, if you are into dawat and tabligh, whatever the case may be, try to be as humble as possible and always be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and always be afraid. You never know, this ni'mat can be taken away from you. Merely just one word, sometimes people lose anything and everything. So that person was the most pious one, and all of a sudden, now that person is the most hated one. One mistake and everything just goes out the window. We should be very, very careful, and this teaches a great lesson. Then there's a part of a hadith that Musannif Ahmad brings, Ana Sayyidu Walid Adam wala fakhra, that I am from the leaders of Bani Adam, and it is not as a means of tafakhur or boasting and pride. And the ayat he mentions from Surah Ma'idah, Ya ayyuha rusul balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik illam taf'al fama balagta risalata. The whole maqsad behind it is that you have to make i'lan of your nubuwwat, and you have to tell people, because otherwise people will not be able to follow. People are not going to know the Prophet, they're not going to follow, and guess what? On the day of Qiyamah, they'll have an excuse to say, we didn't know that the Prophet came. So therefore, there's a hikmah behind it. The Prophethood has to be made i'lan of. And this is one of the reasons why in Dawah and Tabligh we say we follow the footsteps of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Why? But this is important. We need to understand we are following a specific Nabi, and this is the last Nabi. So therefore, this has to be made i'lan that we are following the followers of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This has to be done. Now, in another narration, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned that Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam went through the entire earth and couldn't find anyone. He went from the east to the west, and he saw Banu Hashim, and from Banu Hashim he found he found Banu Hashim the most auspicious one and the esteemed ones for the work of this Nabuwwat. Therefore, this was a great honor for Banu Hashim, and hence they were chosen ones for the perspective of the work of Nabuwwat. Then the Muslim Rahmatullah alayhi is mentioning the Hasab and Nasab of Banu Hashim more specifically, that they were from the Ala of Hasab and Nasab. And one thing he mentions, the wisdom behind it, that the Arabs, they were very particular about someone's Hasab and Nasab. They would always ask who he was, who his parents were, great-grandparents, and the whole tribe and the clan. Meaning, and they were very particular, not only just in human beings, but they were particular about horses, because they were fond of horses, and this was a means of their ride as well. So they would always choose horses that were of great bloodline. So similarly, and they would memorize this. So this was the quality of Arabs, that they would memorize the entire nasab of themselves. And they will describe that. They look, I came from this family. Today we have a hard time memorizing 2 ayats, but they will memorize the entire nasab all the way, right? Wherever they would, would link to a prophet or anything like that. This was a great quality of them, right? So this is something that they would memorize, and they will always mention that. And this was something, a means of not pride, but also to show the authenticity of this individual. Banu Hashim was also known for their shuja'at, their bravery, and they were very, very, fierce when it came to battlefield of warfare. The entire world was under two superpowers at the time, Qaisar and Kisra, the Persians and the Romans. And they were basically, but despite of that, nobody was able to rule these people, because they were known for that, that they were very, very fierce in war. So therefore nobody actually ever took opportunity of ruling them. And they were very, very generous, and they would always be generous to the extent where if they had that single camel, which was a means of their ride, but because there was a guest, they would sacrifice that camel just so that they can feed the guest. That's how generous they were. Today's day and age, unfortunately, none of them had this quality. Then their ability to memorize things. This was again a good quality that they possessed, and something that we need to take a lesson from. A lot of people question, how is this the point that I'm making here? How Imam Azam knew all these hadiths, and where did he get all the hadiths? Where are there? He did not write any book. But we need to understand that this point tells us this is a time of way before Prophet ﷺ was even became a prophet. This was the quality in Arabs that they possessed, that they would memorize hundreds of ash'ar just by listening to them. Up to today's day and age, my understanding, in some parts of the world, even like Mauritania or somewhere, where they do not memorize Quran how we memorize in the South Asian background for a subcontinent, that we have a mushaf and everything, and we keep on repeating. They listen to the sheikh and they memorize it. They listen to the sheikh and they memorize it. It's up to this day and age. This is the quality. This is a specific quality. So how can we, deny someone of their virtues and their great, honor that Allah Ta'ala blessed them, that they were able to memorize hadith just from listening. And then these people are able to listen hash'ar and able to say it, and they were just able to recite it. That's how they were, right? And simple example, if I was to give, back in the days, 90s, I saw the very end time of those dial-up telephones. We used to make the dial the whole number, and it used to go around. I remember when I was a child, I would memorize phone numbers. Phone number was memorized in my head, that this person's number is this, hundreds. Now I can memorize a single number because of cell phones we have. So again, they had this memory was used for everything at that time. They were very ghairat and hamiyat, that they were very, very, when it came to, ghaira, they were the highest of that. Fasahat and balaghat, obviously, they were the most eloquent of speakers. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with Quran, they were the same individuals who had jahalat in them. Quran became their manhaj, and Quran became their way of life, and it changed them completely, altogether. And they became, the best of nations. And the Sahaba became Sahabas because of that very reason. And then Muslim rahmatullah alayhi is going to, is talking about Abdullah, the father of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The name Abdullah obviously holds a great virtue in itself, and is the name of Allah. There are two names Muslim mentioned in the riwayat of Muslim, in the light of riwayat of Muslim, that two names that are very dear to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One is Abdullah, one is Abdul Rahman, right? That's why because the father Abdul Muttalib, his son was very dear to him, and he knew that this son is going to be special for him, so he named him Abdullah. And we get the proof from the Quran for the second name, Abdul Rahman, قُولِ اللَّهَ أَوِدُ الرَّحْمَنِ, that call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the name of Allah, or call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or invoke the name of Allah by the name of Rahman as well. This is the two names Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are very dear to. So Abdul Muttalib named his son because he was his favorite son as well. And it was a decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would name him this, because again, his progeny will have a great work, a great responsibility. A rahmatul lil alameen was coming his way. Therefore, he named him Abdullah, and was the name that there was an ilqa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Abdul Muttalib that he should name his son that. And that is where we end our today's session. That inshallah in the next session, which will be after some time, and we will discuss inshallah the nikah of Abdullah with Amina, and we'll discuss other things as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the understanding of Seerat-e-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the utmost love for our beloved Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.